Sabbath, Shalom, everyone. My name is daughter of Yisrayl, Abel. I want to serve you as a priestess starting very soon. Please find your seats for Sabbath services. Sabbath, Shalom, everyone. My name is daughter of Yisrayl, Abel, and I want to serve you forever as a priestess starting very soon. It's an honor and a privilege to introduce to you the sons and daughters of Yisrayl, Abel, now in turn as sanctuary.
And at this time, I have the great honor and privilege to turn the services over to the great holy women of New in the great House of Yahweh. Praise Yahweh.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. And I'd like to welcome home all of Yahweh's righteous saints. Praise Yahweh that you're all able to make it. And for those who are just watching over the internet, please welcome home also. We pray that your the teachings that we present to you will be of great benefit. Now, I was asked to do a review of some of my previous Yamatrias, and I'd like to start out with, it's from 1 Kings 20, it's verse 22, it's 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 22. And what I had done was I had done a Yamatria of Ilya as being the last prophet standing. And what I did, I said, like Ilya, Yisrael alone is left of all the prophets of Yahweh, but the prophets of Baal number 4,199 men. And if you could show my slide, please. Now, these are the numbers that I came up with, and I wanted to go with the English Gematria, and it's 8304, and it comes from 8280 and 3050. Now, we know that these two numbers, 8280 and 3050, have been brought out by our priests and deacons, and they have expounded on them rather intensively. So I just wanted to go over and show you that the Yisrael is actually inspired by Yahweh himself. Yahweh has prevailed. That's what that means. Now, 8280, we've been told by one of the speakers that if you drop the 0, it comes to 828, and everybody knows what 828 is. Is that correct? What is 828? That's Pastor's birthday. So again, these numbers are inspired by Yahweh to show us that, yes, we can believe into his last prophet in these last days. Now, what I was am going to be going over is I'm going to be going over the peace plan, the temple prophecy, and the Vatican's workings in trying to deceive us into what's going on in these last days. And if I could have my next slide, please. Now, this slide actually is Measure the Temple, and it is the actual page from the 2017 calendar. Measure the Temple, this is the prophecy that was fulfilled in 1989. And again, I had done a Strong's research on that in 1989. One of the definitions means superimposition. Now, if you would read through the temple brochure, if you don't have it, you can request it from Yahweh.com. And you can, or you can call the office after the feast is over, and we can send it to you. But the temple brochure goes into great detail of Yahaqob's prophecy and what has occurred and what the overseer was instructed to do. And I want to go to Revelations 11, 1 through 4. And this is from the book of Yahweh, and it's on pages 977 and 978. And it says, and there was given me a reed like a measuring rod. Now, the me in this verse is, of course, our great overseer, Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins. And the Malach stood, saying, rise and measure the temple of Yahweh and the altar and its confines where they worship within. And again, the overseer has expounded on this, that the only thing that is going to be in these last days rebuilt is the temple itself. The confines on outside are not part of this prophecy. And the overseer again measured the temple and actually has applied for a patent. Can I have my next slide? Oh, there it is. Okay. The slide is already up. Now, these are the dates that we need to focus on. The peace treaty was signed 9/13/1993, and it went into effect 10/13/1993. And this is what we're going to be focusing on this feast in my studies. I'm going to be focusing on this. Now, on 11/22/1993 was when the patent was filed by the House of Yahweh. And if I could have my next slide, please. This is the actual patent that you can download off the internet, and it's the patent filing itself. This is the actual patent that was filed by the House of Yahweh on 11/22/1993. Now, a month later, the Vatican signed an accord with Israel on 12/1993 that had to do with the holy sites and the taxation and everything else. Now, this accord was secret meetings with Israel while the peace treaty was being put into effect. Now, this is the second set of secret meetings that the Vatican had. The first set of meetings, as was brought out, was the meetings behind the scenes of the peace plan. The second set of meetings was the meetings that they had actually with Israel to be able to have control of the holy sites. One of the holy sites is the city of Jerusalem, or how we know it as Jerusalem. Now, these dates are very important because the first date is 9/13/1993. The second date is 10/13/1993. Those are the peace plan dates. Those are the dates that actually put this 7-year peace plan, this prophecy of these last days, into motion. The second set of dates is 11/22/1993. That is the date when the patent for the temple was filed with the United States government. It wasn't only filed with the United States government, it was also filed with Israel. The third set of dates is 12/1993. Now, this is the date of the Vatican signing the accord with Israel. Now, there's another date that I want you to definitely understand. The patent was granted on August 1st, 1995. And if I could have my slide. Yes, that's the 1991. Now, what I want you to notice is, in 1995, after the patent was granted, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated. That is another prophecy in this 7-year peace plan prophecy. That is another prophecy that was fulfilled that the overseer had brought out. Now, you can read the Mark of the Beasts 1 and 2 to get more information on where he brought this information out at the earliest form. Now, I want to again finish off with the saying that says, like Eliah, Yisrayl is the last prophet standing for Yahweh in these last days, and he is bringing forth all of the information that we need to know about with the 7-year peace plan and the building of the third temple. And with that, I turn it on over to the next speaker.
Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. So what a great blessing it is that Yahweh has allowed us all to be gathered here at another Feast of Tabernacles. Praise Yahweh. So today I would like to speak on the topic of Yahweh calls the young also. So you can use your definition of young, but I want all the people 12 and under to raise their hands. Raise their hands, 12 and under. I'm not 12, so I can't raise my hand. 12 and under. Wow, praise Yahweh. Yahweh has given us such a great blessing to be able to be here in Yahweh's house. Okay? So we know that Yahweh used young people in Scripture. Did you know that? And some examples of people that he used. For example, one person that we've been going over in class here lately is Hannah's son, Samuel. Remember, Yahweh called him at a young age? Samuel. Also, many of the prophets were young when Yahweh called them into his work. For example, the prophet Daniel. Our great high priest, Yeshua. He was teaching, what does the scripture say? He was about how many years old? 12 years old, yes. So Yahweh used them in his work to do many different things and to even write for us this great book of Yahweh. And look at the prophet Daniel. He even got to speak. He even got to speak to our great overseer in visions. So when we choose to practice righteousness, when Yahweh calls us, we're going to get into that word calling. Yahweh can use us for many great things. Who wants to be used by Yahweh? Okay, 12 and unders. Who wants to be used by Yahweh? Praise Yahweh. We all want to be used by Yahweh. Just like our great example, the last day's witness, Yisrayl Hawkins. Okay, so we know that Yahweh commands the parents and teachers, and the mothers, I really want to encourage you to remember all the information that's been brought out on teaching our children diligently and what that means. Weaning them off the world like Hannah did her son. And that's in Deuteronomy 6, verse 7. You can turn there right quick. We know that's positive law 11, that you must teach your children diligently. And Deuteronomy 6, verse 7 on page 152 reads, "And you must teach them diligently to your children and talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk on the road, when you lie down, and when you rise up." So you see there, it's a 24-hour job to teach Yahweh's children diligently, especially through example. And there's so much importance put on this that Yahweh even wrote a prophecy for the last days in Yahweh 2:28. We know what that says, that our sons and daughters would prophesy. And our overseer has gone to such a great effort, and the priests and the priestesses have as well, to teach these classes to our children so they can learn these prophecies and get it in their minds, and they'll be able to teach it to others. I want to read you a very encouraging quote from the 7th book of Yisrayl, part 1, chapter 1, and page 71. Chapter 1 and verse 71. So 7th book of Yisrayl, part 1, chapter 1, and verse 71. Pastor says, he's talking about the children. He says, it's great plans that he, Yahweh, has for them. And why? Because he wants to show that there's no age limit. This is why he puts so much importance on teaching our children and using them for a great work. Because he wants to show there's no age limit. He wants to show that there's no age limit in those he uses in his plan. He shows us this in Scripture. Remember, he used a 6-year-old king? Right. Remember this too, Pastor says. No matter who you are, how old or how young you are, you still need Yahweh. Who will we need forever? Yahweh, yes, and his house. He's got to be your guide forever. And you have to remain humble. Humble yourself and remember this, is what our great overseer said. Yahweh and his house has to be our guide forever. So this word call, remember Yahweh calls us, he calls the young also, is Hebrew word 7121. And it means call out by name, to read, proclaim, named, invited, preach, mention, publish, or say. So in these words you can see that also before heaven and earth, Yahweh calls the young as well. Heaven and earth is watching the young children and everything that they're doing and how we teach them and their actions. He also has the righteous, remember their names are written in the book of life, no matter how old or young we are. Yahweh, he calls us. How does he call us? He calls us through the teaching. He calls us through the teaching. How many of you ever sat in services and during a sermon and you get a point that the speaker's saying? You finally get it. That's Yahweh calling you. When our great overseer is up there, or when the priests are up there, or any teachers up here speaking, Yahweh is calling us. And what we need to do is to listen and to obey and see how we can apply it to our own lives. And be humble and be quick to learn, and that's how Yahweh can use us for his work. Because here's where we're blessed. The house of Yahweh is the only place that we are blessed. Out in the world, we're cursed. Everywhere else, there's curses all around the world. And the house of Yahweh is the only place that we're truly blessed, to have the righteous teachers and the righteous parents and counselors to guide us. Remember our great overseer who showed us in Psalm 118 and Matthew 23, where it says, we have blessed you out of the house of Yahweh. Do you remember how he pointed out that in the linear, the Hebrew shows the name Yahweh, and how the King James Version changed it? That is such a blessing that we're able to get these teachings here in the last days. So, in your own time, I really encourage you to read the 7th book of Yisrayl, part 2 and chapter 5. And it's called Keeping the Sabbath as Yahweh Keeps the Sabbath, number 20. The mother of Zebediah's sons. And who remembers this sermon? Many of us, okay. In verse 101, the point of this sermon Pastor was saying was this account of the mother of Zebediah's sons in Matthew chapter 20. He said it applies to us very much here in the last days. The mother that came to Yahshua with the two sons, and she asked Yahshua, please grant that these sons of mine be seated, one at your left hand and one at your right hand. And he said, well, that's not mine to give. We're being offered to sit with Yisrael Hawkins at whose left hand? Yahweh's left hand. So you see the belief they had it in the kingdom of Yahweh, and they didn't even see it yet. They saw Yahshua, but the kingdom of Yahweh is much nearer in our time period than it was in their time period. So here are some questions in verse 101 that Pastor asked us. He said, Yahshua said to them, do you think you're able to do this, to drink of this cup? And he said, listen to me closely. Do you think you're able to do this? Do you think you're able to be a priest or a priestess on this side? Are you able to overcome and go through the same baptism and the same overcoming that Yahshua did? You are. He says you are. Notice what he says to you, speaking to us. We want to be able to say that we can drink of the same cup of Yahshua that Yisrael Hawkins has taught us to do. Okay, so the same righteousness, the same immersion into the word of Yahweh, the same as Yahshua. This is a very encouraging sermon, and I really encourage you to go back and read it in the 7th book of Israel, part 2. And with this, if you all please stand, I'm going to turn over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. Please be seated. Welcome home, everyone. Yahweh's peace be with you. So I'd like to continue on believing into the one sent, because there's two things that we always have to keep in mind. One is believing into the one sent and meditating on the book of Yahweh all the time. So two things, believing into the one sent and keeping the book of Yahweh in our minds. Because there's no room for disbelief at this point in time. I mean, the Gematria is backing up the prophecies and us, the last days established house, established by the last days anointed witness, Yisrayl Hawkins. So Yeshua was sent by Yahweh, but after Yahweh had sent his prophets to foretell about him, right? And then they also foretold of the overseer establishing the house of Yahweh. So, but what did they do to the prophets? They stoned them, they killed them, they sawed them in two, they did all manner of evil against them. And they were accounted as mad for preaching Yahweh's laws and for his prophecies. So a scripture that goes with that, if you turn over to Matthew chapter 21, Yeshua gives us the parable of the wicked tenants and the stone the builders rejected. Because Yahweh is building his house, right? Yahweh unity. And over in the parable of the wicked of the tenants, we see that Yahweh has his vineyard, right? And then he has tenants that were supposed to take care of it. Then he sent his servants to collect the fruits of it. But the tenants killed the servants. And then he sent some more servants, and then they killed those servants, and then he sent his own son, Yeshua. Now, after they had killed Yeshua, it says, Yeshua said to them, have you never read in the scriptures, the stone, and keep this in mind, the stone which the builders rejected has become the headstone of the corner. This is Yahweh's doing, and it's marvelous in our eyes. And we also have that prophecy written for us in Psalms 118:22. The stone which the builders rejected has become the headstone of the corner. And then looking on down back in verse Matthew 21:43, says, therefore I say to you, the kingdom of Yahweh will be taken from you and given to a people of the same habit, but from a foreign land, and they will bring forth the fruits of it. Y'all are the one bringing forth the fruits of it. Praise Yahweh. So I want to bring to remembrance in the Gematria, the cornerstone is 1074, which is the overseer's card tag. And it's absolutely amazing because without Yahweh putting up a whole plan of getting overseer's attention and his servants' attention on his card tag, we would have never found out about this 1074, but of course we would have because Yahweh's in full control. Now, the next one we have is this precious stone. And if you look over to verse 1074, it's precious stone and a bright stone. If you remember the white stone, the stone of acquittal that was given to overseer his lot, and he was saying that white is bright because the laws of Yahweh bring that light to the nations, right? So the bright stone is 828, and that is also given to overseer. Okay, now, this precious stone, like I said, if you turn over to 1 Kepha chapter 2, and looking over to verse 4, he says, the subtitle, it says, the chosen stone of the spiritual house, coming to him as to a living stone, indeed rejected by men. Speaking of Yeshua, but also speaking of us in the last days, speaking of overseer, because he is rejected by everyone. He is hated above all peoples. But chosen by Yahweh and precious, you also as living stones are being built up into a spiritual house, the house of Yahweh, to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to Yahweh through Yeshua Messiah. Absolutely amazing. Therefore, it is also contained in the scriptures, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious, and he who believes on him will by no means be put to shame. Now, this chief, in the Strong's dictionary, if you want to write this down, this chief is number, 2776, and it means the head, right? So the head, and then the Thayer's Greek lexicon, it says the head, the loss of the head destroys life. Head, metaphorically, anything supreme, chief, prominent. And get this, a husband in relation to his wife, the house of Yahweh, right? Now the corner, chief cornerstone, corner also means a secret place. Corner also means a secret place. So Yeshua being the head over the cornerstone, which is the house of Yahweh. Going back to cornerstone, it's 1074, right? Now, can you get the next one? Let me see that one. Yeah, okay. So looking over to Zechariah chapter 8 and 9, because it's absolutely amazing how Yahweh just continues to bring out how close Yeshua is working with the branch, the last day's anointed witness. So Zechariah chapter 3, verses 8 and 9. And he says, hear now, O Yeshua the high priest, you and your companions, the house of Yahweh who sit before you, for you are men wandered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch. For behold, the stone that I have laid before Yeshua, upon this stone complete knowledge and understanding is established. And behold, I will engrave in its inscription, says Yahweh of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day. If you look over to the side note for G22, he shows that the ministers cannot build before Yahweh first lays the stone, which is Yeshua. And then on G23, it says, I will make it perfect in all points, this house of Yahweh, as something accomplished by the hand of Yahweh. And then the last thing I want to cover is in Daniel chapter 2, verse 44. So Daniel gives us the prophecies of the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, which it shows the four great world's ruling kingdoms, and then the last one is the papal Rome, the one in these last days. Verse 44, and in the days of these kings, Yahweh in heaven will appoint a kingdom of priests, which will never be destroyed. And if you look at verse 45, just as you saw that stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it was broken in pieces, the iron. So this is the prophecy for these last days, that not by might nor by strength, but by my spirit, I will establish the house. And if you'd all please stand, praise Yahweh. I'll turn it over to the next speaker. Have a great Sabbath.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Let's make the peace of Yahweh be among us. Please be seated. The title of this talk is Look to Abraham, and I have a gematria slide for that. Look to Abraham, your father. Isaiah 51:2. Now you see 5:1-2 means Yahweh's in full control. So that was Pastor's dream on 5/12 of 2015, that Yahweh is in full control. Isaiah 51, verse 1 says, Look to the rock from which you were hewn or cut. Now that word rock there means strength, refuge. What is our strength? It's the laws of Yahweh, the laws that Yahweh gives us and teaches us. It also means that Abraham is the rock from which Yisrayl was hewn or cut. That word cut is number 2672. I have a gematria for this also. And it says, it was made. It was a stone cut. And if you add those numbers together, 2, 6 plus 7 plus 2, you get the number 17, Pastor's lot number. You can see also the word white stone is number 2828, and that's Pastor's birth date, to show clearly who was hewn from Abraham. In Isaiah 44, verse 2, it says, Israel was formed from the womb. Now we know also that Revelation 2:17 is where that white stone of acquittal was given to our overseer, and showing that he is innocent. Let's turn to page 13 in Genesis 18, verse 19. Okay, Genesis 18, verse 19 says, For I have chosen him so that he, and he's talking about Abraham here, I have chosen him so that he will command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of Yahweh, to do what is right and just, so that Yahweh will bring about for Abraham what he has promised to him. Now remember, the planned genealogies in the 14th book of Israel, part 1, go all into how important Abraham is to our generation. So you see that just as in Isaiah 44, verse 1, it says, Yisrayl, whom I have chosen, he also shows that Abraham was a chosen one back there too. It's a pattern that Yahweh uses over and over. He chooses and draws out 1 and 2 to bring forth the message. Now the 14th book of Israel, where I was talking about in the planned genealogies, chapter 21, verse 47 says, Abraham had in mind now that he was bringing forth this holy seed, and from this holy seed all the nations of the earth would be blessed, not just Yeshua, but many brethren, but also of the other remnant also that Yahweh was calling. Abraham was so guarding, guarding to protect at that time, and if he, Abraham, hadn't have protected it, you wouldn't have it. You see how important Abraham's job was for us in these last days? And aren't you so glad that he was zealous to do the work that he did in his last days to bring those genes of righteousness down to us? Let's see the frequency of Abraham. I have a gematria up there. You see it's 1074. You see that connection that Abraham has with our overseer? And that number means generation, the first fruits. So he knew of us. Abraham's frequency was preparing for our time period. The generation. Now let's go on to Genesis 18:18. Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. Now that's a statement. Now the answer for that statement is Deuteronomy 18:18. In Deuteronomy 18:18, Yahweh promises, I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I command him. Now, isn't it interesting that the statement was in Genesis 18:18, and the answer is in Deuteronomy 18:18. Do you see the connection once again that Yahweh has between Abraham and our great overseer? And that Deuteronomy 18:18 goes directly to Acts 3:22, which shows the card tag of our great overseer. A connection, what a connection. Now I have a few gematриas I just want to quick go over with you. We're going to do this real quickly. It says, who is as Abraham? Pastor's birthday. The next one, obedient as Abraham. 8:28 again. Abraham's seedling. 8:28 again. And Abraham's, I love this one, baby brother. 10:74. So you see how they're connected and how Abraham was watching over us and his baby brother at that time. Genesis 26, verse 4 says, in your seed all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And once again, let's turn to the 14th book of Israel. And that would be chapter 21, verse 39. Overseer says, yes, long before birth by our ancestors, it says our personality is shaped before our birth by our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers, our grandmothers. So you see the responsibility Abraham had and the responsibility we have of passing these righteous genes down. It says, we have been blessed out of the house of Yahweh only, and that's in Psalm 118, verse 26. And overseers always taught us the way you bless someone is you teach them the laws. Abraham was called a friend of Yahweh in Isaiah 41, verse 8. The friend in Strong's is number 157. To love within the bounds of a lawful relationship, especially a close attachment. And look at this here verse it tells you to go to. Leviticus 19:34, a close attachment. And then the last gematria, I just want to answer the question, who is Yahweh's Ahib? Number 157 in the Strong's means friend. Yahweh, Israel, and Abraham are Yahweh's friend, and we will too as long as we stick with them. Let us stand for the great next friend of Yahweh.
Shalom, please be seated. I'd like to start with a gematria, and I would like to welcome you to the city of Israel, Texas. Okay, the city of Israel, Texas. And I'd like to show this on the screen. The city of Israel, Texas, and the numbers were 289, 2177, and 1734. And it actually means in the Hebrew 289, a brother of a portion or a gift. Hebrew 2177 from 2109, properly nourished, fully developed, and it comes from 2109, to be plump, to feed. Hebrews 17:34 means loving, to love. So you can see properly nourished, to be fed. This is exactly what we see in Revelation. Does everybody remember that scripture? To go into her place where she's nourished for a time, times, and a dividing of times, right? The title of my speech this morning is To Be Adoptable, We Must Love Our Adopted Parent with All of Our Hearts. And when we came to the house of Yahweh and we started to learn about Yahweh, we had a very wicked heart. We know that. And last time I showed you Jeremiah 17, 9 and 10. This time I want to show you Matthew 15, verse 8. And it says, these people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but have removed their hearts far from me. They have removed their hearts far from me. Now, in order to become adopted by Yahweh, we have to have a clean, pure heart. And last time I showed you Yahaqob 4:8, because it told us how we could purify these things. This time, I want to show you Yehezkiel 36, verse 26. And it says, a new heart, mind, I will also give you, and a new spirit I will put within you. And I will take away the heart of stone out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. Now, Yahweh is taking away the heart that we came here with, and he's giving us a new heart. Now, he has to do this in some kind of way. It's not like a hocus-pocus diddly-ocus, right? We know that. Our overseers taught us. So we're going to keep reading. In Yehezkiel 36, verses 27 and 28, it says, I will put, this is Yahweh, I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes. And you will keep my judgments and do them. This is how we purify and change our hearts. And you will dwell in the land, the city of Israel, Texas, that I gave to your fathers, and you will be my people. And what will Yahweh be to us? A father. Now, how do we purify our hearts? We have to do something. It's not an automatic thing. It's not something that just occurs, just come to the sanctuary and it's like, okay, you came, you showed up, you sitting in the seats, you're pure. Your hearts are pure. If it were that easy, wow, if it were that easy. But it's not. Now, I showed you Acts 3:19 last time because it showed how that you have to repent and be converted, right? This time I want to show you Hebrews 8, verses 11 and 12. Hebrews 8, 11 and 12. It says, and they will no longer teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, instructing them, know Yahweh. For they will know me. They will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, says Yahweh. I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. That slate is going to be wiped out, just like it says in Acts 3:19, right? Wiped out. He does this through our great teacher. And if you remember the gematria from last time, when I put in Yahweh's greatest teacher in the world, it was number 372, 3218, and 2232. And this is all from the Greek. And 372 meant an intermission, rest, from 373, to repose, remain, refresh, and give rest. That's exactly what we're doing right here at the feast. Number 3218 in the Greek, to lead up, to bring out, which is what Yahweh's doing. He's bringing us out of this world to adopt us into his great family. This is where we are, to bring us to a higher place. That higher place in our fine linen robes, ready to walk into Yahweh Shema, ready to do these great jobs that Yahweh has for us. And that last number, 2232, in the Greek, a leader, a chief person, a governor, prince, ruler, from 2233, to lead, command with official authority. Revelation 18, remember the Moloch who comes, he's actually sent by command, Zechariah says. He's actually sent by command. None of us can say that we were actually prophesied to lead this group into the kingdom. Our great overseer has been prophesied to lead this group into the kingdom. Praise Yahweh. Now, once we have the slate clean, our hearts all clean, Yahweh does a work with us. And I showed you Jeremiah 31:33 last time. This time I want to show you Hebrews 8, verse 10. Hebrews 8, verse 10, it says, for this covenant is the same covenant that I will renew with the house of Israel. After those days, says Yahweh, I'm going to put my law in your hearts. I'm going to put my law in your hearts, house of Yahweh. And I'm going to write it in your hearts. And then it says, I will be their father, and we will be his people. Now, in the gematria, I put in adopted children. Adopted children. And I want you to take a look at this. These are the numbers, 138, 393, and 828. And in the Hebrew, 138 is a worshiper of Yahweh. That's all of you arrayed in your fine linen robes. Hebrew number 393 means to act. Yes, we are, that very act of being here, coming 3 times a year to the great house of Yahweh, giving up the world and coming out and doing what Yahweh requires so that we can be family members. That's what it's about. That's how we become adoptable. And number 828, we all know, remember my typo, that is the overseer's date of birth. So Yahweh's showing he's in here, right? And then for my next gematria, children not by blood, but by spirit. Children not by blood, but by spirit. Number 358, 1939, and 2148. And it means, number 358, house of favor. This is Hebrew, house of favor, probably from Hebrew 11:29, Banah, builder of the family name, House of Yahweh. A house in the greatest variation of application, a family. Number 1939, which means it's a form of 1938, majesty of Yahweh. The last one, Hebrew 21:48, Yahweh has remembered. Yahweh's going to forget about all our sins, and he's only going to remember our righteousness. Remember what it says in Proverbs 17, verse 2, for my last scripture, Proverbs 17, verse 2. A wise servant will have authority over a son who causes shame, and will have a share of the inheritance among the brothers in the great city of Israel, stepping into the great Yahweh Shema. Praise Yahweh! Let's all become adopted children. And with this, if you'll all please stand, I have the awesome opportunity to turn it over to the great and mighty priest in the house of Yahweh. Praise Yahweh!
Praise Yahweh. At this time, we get to hear from Great Deacon Mike Blossoff.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. Please be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. If you'll please turn over to Genesis 11, and we're going to be looking at verse 4. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower." Now, this is not the city of Yisrayl. This is the city of the beastly system. "And a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth." Quickly turn over to Revelation chapter 13. They built this city, a beastly city, a beastly governmental system. Revelation 13, and in verse 11 and 12 we have, "And I saw another beast." Now remember, we had the first beast that came up out of the sea. "I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. And he had 2 horns like a lamb. He spoke like a dragon. And he exercised all the authority of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed." Now let's turn over to Revelation 6, a couple pages over. Revelation 6. And in verse 6, it says, "And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures, saying, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see that you do not hurt the oil and the wine." See that you do not hurt the oil. We see prophecy taking place in a huge way now. We see the prophecies being fulfilled throughout the world. And we see this battle, this fight over the oil and over their way of life, their way of sinful living, which they don't want to let go of. They want total control of it. So after speaking with one of the priests, I was encouraged to do a search on oil and economy. And it yielded some pretty incredible things that will help your understanding in and about this beastly system that rules the world at this time, after the authority of the first beast. So let's get right into it. Okay, let's put that over there. All right, let's see if we can fit that all in there. Okay. So this House of Yahweh hidden code search is oil and economy. Now, when I looked this up, it came up right away, and it only came up one time. And so what we have is right here is the main search, which is oil and economy. Now, let's get into it. The first thing that came up after that is right here, and it's universal. Universal. Then the next thing that was shown in the codes was woe. Now remember, the priest spoke about the 3 woes and the importance behind that. I highly encourage you to go back and listen to his sermon on the 3 woes that he spoke about. Number 3 right there. Then over here, we have the Hebrew year 1852. And so I'm like, okay, 1852, what took place in 1852? Well, around that time, in 1852, was when the oil boom, so to speak, in the United States was in its infancy. It started getting going. And 1852 was when the first kerosene lamp was invented. So I thought that was interesting that Yahweh would put that in there and showing the lamplight was invented in that year. But it's all these things are part of the necessity of the oil products. And yes, the House of Yahweh uses these things to benefit the work. Let's go back to the codes. Okay, so we had 1852, which was kerosene lamp was invented. All right. Then over here we had pastor's name, Yisrayl. Yisrayl was right there. Then down here, going across here, was Yahweh's work. So it shows that Yisrael Hawkins and the work of Yahweh would be going on at the same time that Hurt Not the Oil would be taking place. All right? So now if we go over to here, crossing oil and economy was Babylon. Babylon. Okay. Babylon. Then right here we have crooked. Crooked. And right here we have crumbling, showing that the system is crumbling. And as a priest told me, it's coming apart at the seams because you can see it. You can see there's no unity. There's nothing but mass confusion. Okay? Crumbling. Then over here we have deception. Deception. Down here we have value because it shows a great value in the world. But in value we have whitewash. Because they say that, you know, the supply is limited, it'll run out. But we know that Yahweh made it to be able to be replenished, that the earth replenishes the oil. So there's plenty of oil for everybody. We know that. Okay? Then over here, these right here, is the Hebrew year of 1865, and that's when the commercial oil boom started in New York State and Pitt Hole, Pennsylvania. So that's when the modern oil industry started and really started kicking in. Okay, so that was right there. Then over here, this line across the top here, was the Hebrew year 1923. Now this one's really interesting. This is when the oil well of the century was tapped in the Permian Basin in West Texas. So Yahweh put that date up there to show that even in Texas, the oil boom was taking place. Oil was beginning to get its start. And we know how that's been brought out in the news articles about the Permian Basin and how they're tapping it and how it has so much oil that they don't know what to do with. Okay? Then right here, we have the word Arab. Arab. And we know that the Arab states in the Middle East, in and around the great river Euphrates, is where a majority of the oil is being pumped to the world, and where they're fighting over the oil the most is in that area. Then over here, we have 16, 17, and 18 all together. This line here, this one right here, and these two characters or letters. And this one is, it didn't say hurt not the oil. Yahweh always puts them in the codes in different ways. It said harm oil not. So we have harm oil not. And of course right here we have petrodollar, and it's connected to economy. All right? And of course, I knew this one was going to be in there. Okay? Let's see where we at. Right here. This one and this one. This one is Euphrates River. Euphrates River. Okay? And if we go over here, this line here, and this little section here, political and religious. Political and religious, because it's a political and religious beastly system. This beastly system of iniquity. Now, I was encouraged to look up something else regarding this search, and it was an add-on, and it didn't say second beast. It said second beastly system. Second beastly system. So we see that the war going on in and around the great river Euphrates over the oil, who has control of the oil and who wants control of the oil, and you cannot buy, sell, or trade unless you accept that mark and accept that way of life that the second beast, which is following after the first beast, is bringing forth in these last days. Now, I highly encourage everybody to get out your Mark of the Beast books and start going through them. Start building your knowledge in the prophecies of these things that are taking place, or you may be left behind. You may not get what's going to be brought out. So study hard, study the books, follow every teaching, get involved this feast. If you want greater knowledge, get involved in the work. Get involved in the work. Get involved in the work. And if you'll all please stand. I have the great privilege to turn it over to a great priest in Yahweh's house, the great Kohan Benjamin Krause Hawkins.
Is it Shabbat? Yeah, Shabbat Shalom. The peace of Yahweh be with us all and everyone watching. Please be seated. The tongue, it's hard to control. All right. Well, praise Yahweh. Here we are at the great Feast of Tabernacles 2019. It's going to be the most yawesome feast ever. Remember that Y. It's very important, okay? We've got to keep that Y in our mind. We've got to get this G, this God, these gods out of our mouth. Can I have my first slide? We'll see why as we go along here. The title of my sermon is called The Builders, Architects of Deception. Okay, Architects of Deception. And we've heard a lot this morning already about building the family name. Which pastor is, he is the family builder, the builder of the name of Yahweh and the house of Yahweh, okay, in these last days, Zerubbabel. But there's some other builders. Remember, there's always two sides of the coin, right? So that means there's another side of that number 1122, because 11, I want you to understand something about the numbers 11, 22, and 33. Those are the master builder numbers of the Freemasons. Okay, they're builder numbers. We'll learn more about that as we go along. Not today, maybe, but in another sermon. Can I have the next slide? I gave you all an assignment a few weeks ago. I asked you, remember the frequency of linen, 5,000? And the frequency signature of the man clothed in linen was 1934. And I asked you to subtract 1934 from 5,000. Did anybody do that? Because here's what you get. Here's what you become when you lose the 1 cent. You become Yada. You become Yada, and you become Lucius, which is a form of Lucifer. Now remember, Yada was the light bringer. Remember, they did bear the light of Yahweh. They were supposed to be teaching the laws of Yahweh, but they didn't do so. They held the scepter, the evil scepter. So we don't want to lose the 1 cent. I'm looking at that 1 cent there, and it says Passover. Passover 2010. I guess you could drop those zeros and you'd get 21, right? That's the second Passover, isn't it? That pastor's looking forward to? Huh. Can I have my next slide? So let's start at the beginning, because we're going to take a journey. It's a course we're going to take. And this is Genesis 3:5. It says, "And the serpent said to the woman, 'You will not surely die, for he knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be as gods, Elohim, knowing righteousness and evil. Let's look at these numbers. The first one is 1870, and it means a course of life or mode of action, custom, eastward, journey. Now, remember that word eastward means the beginning. It's in Genesis. It talks about their journey, the journey that mankind is taking from the beginning, this course of life, this Nimrod course, as we're going to see, because they left off Yahweh, they listened to the serpent, and they said, yeah, we want to be as gods. We want to be God. Let's look at the second number, 1122. We're familiar with this number, but I'm going to give you some more definitions from that number that you haven't seen yet. It means sons, as in original sons, the original sons of Yahweh. Assyrians, meaning people with the mark of Cain, 666. Babylonians. Remember, Babylon means confusion, which is what the Nimrod system brought to mankind. It means beasts. It means tumultuous one. Remember, Moshe talked about the great tumults with the people with the mark? Foreigners to Yahweh's covenant. Troops, remember that word Gad or God, a euphemism for God, means troop. Warriors, whelps. Remember, a whelp is what Yada's called. Remember, he's a lion's whelp, a lion's cub. From 1129, and it means builders. And the third number, 1443 in Jewish, it means masons. Masons, okay? And we're going to learn what a mason really is, because you don't have to join a lodge to be a mason, okay? Because Satan was the first mason. Pastors taught us that. Cain was a mason. Everyone that follows this way is a mason. When you add up all those numbers, you get 4435 from 4427, and it means to make queen, reign, and ruling. Now that's talking about the queen of heaven that these original sons are following, okay? And that the whole world is following at this time. These builders, these masons that are, we're going to learn that building isn't building a building. They're not building a building. They're building something completely different, but it's a society that's void of Yahweh, that has nothing to do with Yahweh, okay? Now notice, Freemason, compass, and square. We're going to learn about that. You see that big G in the middle? Well, I used to read about how they said that meant God, and I believe them, okay? It means God. You got that right, because that's what they want to become. Freemason, compass, and square, 1122. Okay, so I told you we're going to take a journey from the very beginning. Can I have my next slide? And if you remember, I did a sermon years back about Route 66, because this ties in. It's an allegory of this journey of mankind from the beginning in Genesis that they're taking to the end, okay, which we're almost at now. Now, U.S. Route 66, it's called the Main Street of America, or the Mother Road. Isn't that interesting? The Mother Road. Mother meaning the Satan, the Lilith, Lucifer, was one of the original highways in the U.S. highway system. Established 1111. Remember, that's one of their master builder numbers. And by the way, it was approved by C.Y. Avery, who was a 32nd degree Mason. And we'll learn more about why this highway system was developed for money, for monetary gain, to make a lot of money for the Masons all over America. It was established 11/11/26. This infamous American road originally ran from Chicago, Illinois to Santa Monica, California, covering a total of 2448 miles. Now it shows you also off to the right, the birth of Route 66 was actually when this cable came through, when they said, hey, we want this number assigned to that highway that you're going to develop. And that was on 4/30/1926, 4/30. Now, when you put in the gematria from Chicago, Illinois to Santa Monica, California, you get that number 430. Well, number 430 in Strong's Hebrew means Elohim, God, little g God, goddess, from 433, God, gods. Remember, we're talking about the root of the house of God, or the house of Bethel, that started all the way back when they decided, to leave off Yahweh. Can I have my next slide? Now, I put the Main Street of America, the Mother Road, in gematria, and I want you to pay attention to what these meanings are. It means community. It's 2268. It means community. From 2267, an association, a company of bad priests, spell, band, charmer, a charmer company, a Babylonian magic, enchantment, a society or a secret society. From 2266, that's the word I want you to always key in on, 2266. Now, I need to mention something about that number 66. If you remember and you think of Route 66, the book of Yahweh has 66 books, and the 66th book is the book of Revelation. The book of Isaiah, okay, has 66 chapters. And it's also a form of, it shows the whole plan of Yahweh from the beginning to the end. In fact, Isaiah is split up into two different parts. The first 39 chapters show the fall of man, the judgments, the sentence of mankind. And then when you get to verse or chapter 40, that alludes to volume 2, in the volume 2 where it talks about comfort my people. And you start learning about the Messiah coming and Yisrayl Hawkins and all those things, right? So it's broken up into two parts, just like the book of Yahweh is. It's a form of the book of Yahweh in that one book. I kind of jumped ahead, but it means to unite, 2266, to form an alliance, to join a league, to tie a magic knot or spell, to charm. And then 2268 in the Greek means Isaiah, which I just explained to you. Isaiah, the book of Isaiah has 66 chapters. Remember Route 66. It's going to end, if you remember, chapter 66 in Isaiah shows the 1 hour burning. That's the end of their road that they're following here, this route that man has chosen to follow. Okay, now 2448 in the Greek means dullness of eyes and drunkenness. From 2447, dull, to be dull from wine, brilliant red. And lo and behold, it's only used one time in Genesis 49:12, speaking of Yada. Okay? And then 2448, remember that's the number of the miles of Route 66. 2448 Greek means Yada. What an amazing coincidence, right, House of Yahweh? Okay, so let's remember that number 2266, because I'm going to tie it in to all these people that are following Satan. Let's have my next slide. Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians. Okay, the four ruling religions. Ruling religion, 666. Let's look at that first number. 379 means man or men of renown. Remember the gods. They called them giants in Genesis. They were the men of renown, the God worshipers. They weren't giants, so don't be looking for giants to come, 10 feet tall from outer space. That's a lie. That's a YouTube video that you probably watched. But don't believe that. These giants are these men of renown, these four ruling religions that are following Cain. 379 in the Greek means without a defense, without an excuse. Remember, he talked to them in Romans chapter 1, and he told these Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians, you know the law of Yahweh, you know the judgments of Yahweh, you're without excuse. Now, Hebrews 22:74, it goes to 22:66. I told you to watch for that because it ties all this association, this company of men, these company of evil priests, and this secret society, okay, that they're compact and coupled together, that have fellowship with one another, that had made a league with Satan, an alliance with Satan, and against Yahweh, that are opposing Yahweh. Okay? And 2274 in the Greek means bad, evil in the widest sense, poisoned, inner malice, flowing from a morally rotten character, foul, bad, evildoer, evil thing, evil men, wretches, loathsome and wrong. I mean, how much more evil could you get? Okay? Now, the 1407, there it is, Gad, which is a euphemism for God. And it's from 1413. It means to assemble in troops or bands, gather in troops. And then 1407 in Greek means a sickle, a gathering hook. So this letter G, Pastor told us in his last sermon, he says that we need to stop calling it gematria or gamatria. In fact, he called it in the Mark of the Beast gamatria, Gammatri, because gamma is the letter G in Latin or Greek. But now let's have that next slide. I want you to show you this picture of this Masonic temple. And you see that throne there with the letter G above it? That's where the worshipful master sits. Wow, he must be important, huh? Worshipful master. The grand poobah. And the Flintstones, I guess, you know? Okay, so they must be really important guys, right? Holy and great, as a matter of fact. And you notice on the altar there, you see the 4 horns? You see those 4 horns? Those are the 4 ruling religions that are controlling the Freemasons. The Freemasons and the Catholics, I showed you that Catholicism is Freemasonry. Okay, that's all it is. If you're outside the House of Yahweh, you are a Mason. Okay? In fact, you can take that word Mason and split it up. Ma, son of the mother, following the mother, right? I'm not saying that's what it means, but I like to break words down. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, because I'm going to show you some really holy and great guys. You know, remember these 10 kings that made a league and joined up with Rome here recently in 2016? They call themselves the Holy and Great Council of the Orthodox Church. And notice, this gives them away again. 2844 means to break down either by violence or by confusion and fear, to abolish. You know, that's what they've done. They've abolished Yahweh's laws, confusing the people. Terrify, remember they're terrorists that beat down and discourage mankind. Strong's Greek 2844 means a sharer, a partner, a companion, a comrade. Yes, they're all comrades. Associates. 2839, defiled, unclean, impure, unwashed, profane, unholy. From 4862, joined close together in tight identification, together with, associated with. And Pastor told us, you know, if you're a Mason, you go to court and the judge sees that you're a Mason, you know, they have signs they make and they wear rings and this and that you're not going to jail. They're going to look out for you. You're one of their comrades. You're joined close together with them. This next number, 2267, remember it goes to that 2266 or 2266. Remember Route 66. Remember Revelation 22 is the last chapter in Revelation, which is interesting also. And it means to join, to tie a magic knot or spell, to charm, charmer, compact, couple together, have fellowship with, make an alliance, league, and fascinate. Fascinate. Yeah, they fascinate. Fascination. Fascinate was 666 in Gematria, and that's what occurred with Eve. She became fascinated by these arguments of the serpent, and she became a god. Let's look at 2267 in the Greek. It means Herodians. Herodians? Didn't Pastor tell us that the Herodians were the ones that formed the army and took these 4 ruling religions to Rome? Remember, beyond Babylon? The Herod? Can I have my next slide? When you add up the numbers in Holy and Great Council, you get 5585. It means to feel or grope about, to grope for. Remember, they're groping in darkness. Remember that? They can't find an answer. All their demons are even in darkness. They're divining. Their divination has become darkness, and they're groping about. They don't know what to do. 5585, that's in the Greek, by the way. 5585 in the Hebrew means to lop off bows. Well, Isaiah 10:33 says, behold, Yahweh of hosts will lop off the bow with terror. Those of high stature, you know, those holy and great guys that call themselves holy and great, those of high stature will be hewn down. Remember the tree, the evil tree is going to be cut down and cast into the fire at the end of Route 66. And the haughty will be humbled. Now let's look at holy and great, 666. 671 means I will divide the deceivers. 666 is the mark of Cain, the sign or signature of the beast. And Hebrew 111 means to be fierce and severe. And Greek 111 means unlawful thing, an abominable thing. And when you add up those numbers, you get 1448 from 1443, and it means, what else? Masons. Masons. Can I have my next slide? Here we go. The letter G that Pastor told us about. You put in the letter G in Gematria, and look what you get. 430, God. God. Why do you think they have the letter G over that compass, in the middle of that compass, and over that chair where the worshipful master, the grand poobah, sits. Right? It means God, big God, little God. So all you watching out there that think that, if you worship the big God and you don't worship the little g God, that you're okay? No, they're all the gods, okay? And that's what Satan told. You want to be gods. You can become gods. You can join the Masons and you can be a god, right? Now notice, if you put in God, Goddess, Elohim, you get 1122. Remember, those are the builders. And 494 means God has given. God has given is 666 in Yahmatria, okay? I don't think I'd want to be given by God. How about you? Now, these builders, Psalm 118:22, the stone which the builders rejected has become the headstone of the corner. That word builders is word number 1129. Let's look at the next slide. They also say that G stands for the great architect of the universe, the grand architect of the universe, the supreme architect of the universe. They say, this is from Wikipedia, it's the conception of God discussed by many Christian theologians and apologists. As a designation, it is used within Freemasonry to represent the deity neutrally in whatever form. Whatever God you worship, whatever God you want to call on. In fact, it's a prerequisite in a Masonic lodge. You must believe in God. You must believe in God. It doesn't matter what God. It could be Allah, Buddha, Christ, Krishna. Don't matter. As long as you believe in a God. Remember, they're universal. All the gods. And it says, and by whatever name each member may individually believe in. You put that in Gematria, notice, or Yahmatria, sorry, I got to get that G's hard to get out. Yahmatria means prophet, things of profit set forward. We're going to talk about that next time, about these profiting that they do. And Strong's 1966 is the next number, and it means Hillel, Lucifer. It's the very word used in Isaiah 14:12, Lucifer. That's who they're following. The third number, 2982, means to tread down underfoot and be polluted. Now, I want you to notice something else about 430, which means God. The Church of Satan in America was founded on 430, God, right? 1966, which means Hillel, Lucifer, right? Now, I want to tell you something about this Church of Satan. They say they don't believe in Satan as a being. They said that you're a god. You're a god. Okay, you're a god. There's a God within you. Now, I got to get this last one here, and then we'll turn it over. But let me show you a quote from Pastor. Next slide. Okay, this is from the 12th book of Israel, chapter 1584. Pastor says, turn over to Psalm 118 and look at verse 22. He says, the person Yahshua was rejected by these Masons. He was found guilty by the chief priests who were the leaders, the top leaders. Chief, that means top. Remember the top bow that Yahweh's going to lop off? And he says here, Psalm 118:22, the stone which the builders, the Masons, that word there is mason, builders, Masons rejected. They're the ones that deal with the laws falsely. They're also called scribes in the second part of the book of Yahweh. That's Psalm 118:22. The stone which the Masons rejected has become the headstone of the corner. Now that's prophecy. Now, yeah, let's. I'm going to have to skip through this because my time's up, but I'm going to show this last thing because I got to set Pastor up. Go to the very last slide. We'll cover these other slides next time. Just go to the very last slide with the Y, because I want to go out with a Y, okay? We need to know why we're using Y, okay? Notice the Hebrew Yod and the letter Y, both 828 in Yahmatria. That's the birth date of the witness Yisrayl. Now, when you add up the numbers in the Hebrew Yod Gematria, you get 2533, and it means greatly beloved. Remember Yisrayl, greatly beloved? The letter Y, when you add up all the numbers, you get 1789, and it means to sprout, to grow green, and to bring forth. Strong's Greek 1789 means to educate, nourish up in, train, form the mind. Remember, he's a builder. He's forming us. He's forming our character. But he's doing it according to Yahweh's pattern. Remember the Y. When you add up the numbers in, now look at, the Y is Yahweh, 1934. Wow, what a coincidence. And when you add up all those numbers, you get 3026 from 7717, which means a witness. A witness. Yes, Yisrayl, the witness, Yisrayl, to testify, to record. Okay, that's all I have time for. I'm going to leave pastors up here. No, I'm already over. So if you'd all please stand, it's been a great blessing. And remember why. Now you know why, okay? Use Yamatria. Don't give the gods any credit. They had nothing to do with the Mark of the Beast book and all the writings of the House of Yahweh, okay? So Yamatria, okay? All right. And with that, if you're all standing, I'd like to turn it over now to the great Kohan Yehuda Hawkins.
Shalom. This will be easy. Turn to page 1 in the book of Yahweh. We're going to look at Genesis 1 and 2. This will be another part of the trial of Lucifer. You can call it the Lucifer murder case. The scripture reads, "In the beginning Yahweh created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth became without form and empty, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of Yahweh was hovering over the face of the waters." The word earth that is written in Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2 is translated from the Hebrew word aratz. This word is listed on page 153 of a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius First, which shows this word means the universe. Everything, in other words. The words without form that are written in Genesis 1, verse 2 are translated from the Hebrew word tahu. This word is listed on page 750 of the Analytical Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon by Benjamin Davison, which shows this word means desolate. And it said, "And the earth became without form and empty." Well, something got desolated, an abomination of desolation. The word empty. Now this one almost made me fall all over the floor. The word empty that is written in Genesis 1, verse 2 is translated from the Hebrew word bahu. Bet he wa. This word is listed on page 182 of a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius First, which shows this word means Buto, the mother of the gods. The word darkness that is written in Genesis 1, verse 2 is translated from the Hebrew word shashak. This word is listed on page 501 of a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius First, which shows the word means death. The word spirit that is written in Genesis 1, verse 2 is translated from the Hebrew word ruach. This word is listed on page 1287 of a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius First, which shows this word means the word or promise of Yahweh. The word deep that is written in Genesis 1, verse 2 is translated from the Hebrew word tahum. This word shows a trace back to the Hebrew root word tam, that's tet mem safit. The computer kind of typed it different, which is listed on page 1476 of a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament, which by Julius First, which shows this root word means whole or entire or all, A-L-L. The word hovering that is written in Genesis 1, verse 2 is translated from the Hebrew word marahafat. This word is listed on page 1294 of a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius First, which shows this word means to cover, to protect, to cherish, or love. The word faces that is written in Genesis 1, verse 2 is translated from the Hebrew word fanim. This word is listed on page 627 of the Analytical Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon by Benjamin Davidson, which shows this word means in the presence of. So this is what it is saying in this scripture, and it's really serious. In the beginning, Yahweh created the heavens and the universe. The earth was part of it. Don't feel the earth got left out. That's part of the plan, Yachanan 1:1. Now the universe became desolate, for it had come under the rule of the mother of the gods, Elohim, and all in the universe had to face death. When a dictator comes into power, they always kill off all the people that helped them get there. Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, Quisling, several mafia dons, you name it. Satan was trying to do the same thing. Now the universe came desolate, for it had to come under the rule of the mother of the gods, and all in the universe had to face death. She planned to wipe out everything if she could, everyone and everything. But it says this, but Yahweh was with all in the universe whom he loved to protect them, as he has promised in his word. Now, the point of this is it said, and death. There was death trying to kill everybody. The interesting thing is in Revelation 11 and 12, it shows that Satan cons 1/3 of the holy Malachim to fall away with her. What they don't know is if she has her way, she's going to kill them too, because they helped her get into power if she got into power. So Satan committed unbelievable atrocities against all creation. And kill, kill, kill was the name of the word. And that was exactly what she did. And everyone but Yahweh had to face death if she had her way. That's what the scripture is saying. This is the crime that was committed in the trial of Lucifer. Now, on the Day of Atonement, you heard part of the trial in that Yahweh took the witness stand to testify against her. This is the trial. It's what she's being tried for. These murders. He was doing these murders even in when all things were created. She tried to destroy it and kill. So the crime has been committed. And the crime of murder, she is to stand trial for. But when a person commits a crime, what do they do first? Do they drag him into the court and hang him, or do they do something else? Does anyone know what the word is? It's called indictment. It goes before a grand jury, and there's an indictment. They say, yes, this needs to be tried. It looks like a crime has been committed, or there's evidence of such. Well, shoot, you have Genesis 1 and 2. There's the evidence right there. But here is the indictment. Turn to Yahaqob 8, page 8, verse 44 on page 825. This is Yeshua talking. He proclaimed the indictment himself. Page 825, your book of Yahweh, Yahaqob 8, verse 44. 8, verse 44. And once you finish this, you'll have the crime, the indictment, and how the trial began, and the testimony as the trial of Lucifer. You are of your teacher, who is Satan the devil, and whatever she who is your teacher desires you will do. She was a murderer from the beginning and remained not in the truth, because there is no truth in her. Therefore, when you speak her falsehood, you speak her words, because she is a liar and a teacher of all lies. She's a murderer, and she commits perjury every second of every clock. So you have the crime. All of the creation she tried to kill, and some of them she did. You have the crime. Now you have the indictment to carry on to the testimony you heard during the Day of Atonement. You have the crime, the indictment, and the first part of the trial. And that concludes the information for today. May Yahweh bless your understanding. And I turn the services over to the great Kohan Elia Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. The peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Now, I want to remind you very quickly in what we're going through here with the feast that rises out of the sea. It's very important to follow through. If you've never read it before, I'm sure most of you have, go back and, as Kanya Didia said, reread and study this Mark of the Beast book. You'll actually see prophecy Pastor wrote about 44 years ago taking place right now before your very eyes. And if you want to know about this second beast, read chapter 5. Don't just skip 1 through 4 and think it's not needed, but read chapter 5. You literally see going on in prophecy what's taking place. And I want to quickly read to you what Pastor wrote 44 years ago. It says, Daniel saw, this is page 56, Daniel saw 4 beasts in his vision. They were governmental powers which were combined with religious powers in the 4th beast, which is the Roman Catholic government religion that has come down to this day. It is the same religion that Nimrod started, but disguised by a different name. Now he goes on to say that both the first and second beast deceive those that dwell on the earth through the power that they could bring peace on the earth. Let me read that one more time. Both the first and second beast deceive those that dwell on the earth through the thought that power could bring peace on the earth. And of course, this is peace through war. But notice Pastor goes on to say that this first and second beast is a political, religious power that has accomplished the task of deceiving the whole world through the help of Satan. So the second beast, that's their job. They're deceiving this whole world to believe that peace will come through war, through this power. Remember, a government by the people, led by the people for the people. That's the same government that they came to Samuel and said, we don't want a priest, we want a king for the people and by the people. It's the same thing. So remember that when you're watching the news today, you'll see Pompeo, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, meeting with the Vatican, and they're proclaiming they want religious freedom. Listen very carefully. They're claiming to let everyone worship the Catholic Church. Be like the Catholic Church. Follow the beast. It's not you can believe whatever you want to believe, but you have the freedom to believe what we tell you to believe, and no government, speaking of China and other governments, should tell you you can't do that. And then the tanker that was attacked, an Iranian tanker. It's very interesting that Saudi Arabia was attacked, and with minutes they knew who it was. Iran is attacked, and nobody knows. But the interesting part with this oil is the economy. It controls the economy. It is the most purchased commodity on the market today. Everyone ties into oil one way or another. But watch and pay attention. This oil that was Iranian oil, remember they're sanctioned. It's not supposed to be on the market. It should have no value. They don't use the petrodollar. But when that got attacked, oil went up 2% immediately. Now, this is oil that's not even supposed to be on the market, and it went up. That makes no sense. That's a product that's not even supposed to be sold, and now you are the ones paying for it. And then Syria and Turkey, you see what's going on. Of course, President Trump telling Recep Tayyip Erdogan, that's the president of Turkey, that due to his infinite wisdom, President Trump says that if Turkey steps out of line, he will destroy their economy, and he has the power, representing the second beast, to shut down their economy where they cannot buy, sell, nor trade. Remember, Iran says that's because of this U.S. dollar. It's being used as a weapon of war. Well, Turkey's going in, and you're seeing the onslaught. They're actually slaughtering people right now, and these people don't know who to turn to. They don't think they can turn to the president of Syria. They can't turn to the United States. So now they're saying, well, we'll turn to Russia. Maybe Russia will help. And of course, there's no peace. They're searching for peace, but finding none. Only the House of Yahweh can deliver them from this beast that's seeking to devour each and every person that does not agree with it. And then at the end, we have an interview that they held with President Putin, and he's talking about this nuclear war and this confusion that's taking place. And watch carefully how all these things are tying together, because you're going to see President Putin. He says, I think it's clear, everyone understands that NATO is just a tool for U.S. foreign policy. And that foreign policy he's talking about is, you'll hear him say, when the United States gets someone into NATO, Poland doesn't know it yet, but they're going to move their weapons in, and they're building up around the Russian border. And President Putin says, Russia is prepared for this. We're prepared for this. If need be, nuclear war. We're prepared for it. So please pay close attention, because every bit of this mark of the beast, please get it and read it. You're seeing it come to pass before your very eyes. If we could please play the news.
Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Jeff is on assignment. Well, the U.S. and Holy See's relation is in the news, ongoing troubles in Iran, and Turkey is making military moves into Syria after the U.S. pulled out. But first, we're going to talk about something that we have brought your attention to before regarding U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo calling on all nations in his visit to Rome to join the Trump administration to protect religious freedom. He also pointed at China, Cuba, and Iran, stating that about 11 Christians die a day for their faith, and those countries are actually key countries for repressing religious freedom, and that 1 in 9 Christians experience high levels of persecution. That's up from 14% from last year. He also called on the Holy See and the representatives of all nations at the meeting to join the U.S., calling for the freedom to worship God. Well, this meeting comes after President Trump's push to protect religious freedom. Well, this conference in Rome with the U.S. and Holy See marked 35 years since they established diplomatic ties. The U.S. Embassy to the Holy See was founded in 1984 with a mutual vision between President Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II. U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, said in an interview with EWTN News, he said, "The conference will focus on religious freedom, human trafficking, and development aid." He also talked about how local faith-based groups can help push the topic of religious freedom in their areas and to legislators to help make them aware of this topic. He also stated how they have churches and parishes in various places to help rebuild churches in places like Iraq. He closed by saying the Vatican, the Holy See, and the U.S. government have great capacities to push for more religious freedom everywhere. Now, he hopes to see more growth and cooperation between the three, and he believes this goal will be achieved. Well, Larry has some information on us regarding the things that we've seen taking place with Iran and some things with its oil tankers being held captives, sanctions have been placed on Iran, and also some other things with Russia getting involved with some oil deals if certain things don't change with kind of the sanctions and the economic oppression placed on some of these countries by the U.S. Larry, what do you have for us?
Persia is back in the headlines this week after one of its oil tankers was struck off the coast of Saudi Arabia. At present, no one has come forward to announce responsibility for the attack, but the incident is being viewed with enhanced alarm since the event comes on the heels of another recent event where 2 major oil facilities in Saudi Arabia were also struck. The ripple effect of those blasts have emanated all the way to the U.S.'s pumps, where gas prices have risen yet again by another 2%. Another consequence of the assault, which might be easily overlooked, are the tons of oil that were spilled into the Red Sea. The famous inlet was the site of the attack and was already suffering from severe pollution. In consideration of that fact, Iran's foreign ministry says those behind the operation have that on their account as well. The U.S., however, asserts that it was Tehran which struck the facilities in Saudi Arabia, as well as having been behind several other related incidents. Iran denies the allegations, but with that as a pretext, America has newly dispatched hundreds of U.S. troops to Riyadh's aid, reportedly to deter Iranian aggression. Tesla's ambition to deter the potential tyranny of unscrupulous energy pioneers must now seem not so crazy after all, following the disturbing emergence of what's being called an energy famine. The development is at one of its worst states in Britain, where last winter 16,000 people reportedly died as a result of not being able to afford heat. There is no shortage of heat in the Euphrates, where any of several fires are still raging, including the old feud between the Kurds and Turks. Turkey recently set out, in fact, to launch an offensive in Syria aimed at its Kurdish competition and seemed to have U.S. backing, according to certain statements released by Washington prior to its actions. When the offensive began, however, the current administration reportedly altered its stance, breeding yet even more hostility and distrust into its relationship with Ankara, which was already strained to say the least. Analysts suspect that as a result of Turkey's move, the Kurds will now be compelled to strengthen ties with President Assad or forge a new relationship with Russia. The relationship between Iran and China seems to be shifting, although China had initially disregarded American demands to buy and sell according to its dictates. A recent breakdown in a major oil agreement between them and Tehran is causing raised eyebrows. Iran's oil minister announced that the China National Petroleum Corporation is reneging on a $5 billion development deal which China had agreed to pay in U.S. currency. French Total is reported to have kowtowed to American pressure and backed out of a deal with Iran due to U.S. sanctions as well. All of this is a part of the environment that Tehran has had to face following the implementation of international sanctions and America's withdrawal from the nuclear treaty, which has produced an 80% drop in Iranian oil exports, despite its expressed determination to pursue all available avenues to maintain its viability. With all of that in play, Iran is now warning that it will further reduce its obligations under the nuclear treaty itself if its supposed European allies cannot or do not fulfill their promise to protect the Iranian economy. For IPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan, back to you.
Well, definitely looks like these countries are going to do whatever they need to do to secure the financial and economic stability of their country, even if it means a threat being put on them from the United States. Well, in a major policy shift, U.S. President Donald Trump ordered all American troops out of northeastern Syria, arguing that it was time to get out of what he called these ridiculous, endless wars, adding that countries in the region should figure the situation out. Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill, who often lend their support to the president, ended up rebuking him for his, quote, reckless decision on Syria. Now everyone is wondering if it will follow through despite the political backlash. Trump also issued a warning to Turkey, threatening to destroy its economy if it does anything in Syria that he might consider off limits. Meanwhile, the United Nations continues to push its agenda to draft of a new resolution or constitution for the country. The UN considers the recently announced Syrian Constitutional Committee a political breakthrough for Syria. The committee will hold its first meeting later this month in Geneva. Well, as a result of the war in Syria, 13 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. 5.3 million of them are children, 6.6 million are internally displaced, and 5.64 million are registered refugees. More than 400,000 people have lost their lives, and the damages across the country are estimated to cost $388 billion. Well, some feared when the U.S. pulled out of Syria that Turkey would start bombing their neighbor, and that's exactly what has taken place. But they haven't just launched a bombing campaign. No, they now say they have captured a key city in a border town. Numerous disturbing videos are emerging on the internet of Kurdish fighters being taken as prisoners and being publicly executed. There are also fears that ISIS could make a comeback as 700 people, including 250 ISIS brides, have escaped from a Syrian refugee camp. But the focus is still on Turkey's military and the militias it backs as they enter their fifth day of attacks on Kurdish militants and civilians as they push further into Syria. Well, with hospitals overflowing with burned and broken bodies and more gruesome videos showing up, like the roadside assassination of a leading female Kurdish politician who was completely unarmed, the local groups, or the groups carrying out this sectarian violence, are raising fears that what is actually taking place is an ethnic cleansing in northern Syria. Now, the Kurdish-led Syrian Defense Forces are begging for the American allies to close northern Syrian airspace to Turkish warplanes. President Trump just released $50 million in aid to, quote, protect persecuted ethnic and religious minorities. However, The SDF reportedly told ABC News their commander has expressed to the United States if they won't stop Turkey from attacking, the SDF will have to ask Russia for help. Well, in an interview with Russia today, President Vladimir Putin says whether or not there is a new arms race developing in the world, Russia has nothing to worry about because their technology is already unmatched. Putin also says the U.S. uses NATO as a way of distributing their weapons where they please, many uncomfortably close to their borders. Some fear we are on the verge of a second Cold War. Why don't you take a listen to what the Russian president had to say about that?
Do you think that a new arms race could plunge us back into another Cold War?
I wish it does not happen. In any case, Russia will be the least affected party because, as I said, we already have the next generation of weapons, and these are unprecedented, with unmatched capabilities. In that sense, we've done our homework. We do not need to rush now and can calmly think of what could be done next. Military spending also plays a role here. It may or may not come as a surprise to you, but Russia ranks 7th in terms of defense spending. Saudi Arabia is 3rd. US military spending totals $716 billion, if I'm not mistaken, and next year they asked for $750 billion. Next comes China with around $177 billion, followed by Saudi Arabia with $59 billion, right? Trailing behind are the UK, France, Japan with $48.1 billion, based on the data I have, and Russia is only 7th with $48 billion. However, we have unmatched military capabilities. What has made it possible? It comes as a result of focused research on priority areas, and the credit here goes to our specialists, their ability to identify those areas, mobilize resources. It has been made possible thanks to research institutions, production know-how, fundamental knowledge and competences. Therefore, an arms race is a bad thing, and it will not be good for the whole world. However, we will not be dragged into exorbitant budget spending games.
Despite this, NATO continues to press forward. Do you feel that the alliance's march towards Russia's borders is a threat? How will you respond to it?
We do feel it, certainly. We've always felt it and voiced our concerns. We were told, don't be afraid, you're not the target, and there is nothing to fear. NATO is changing. It is no longer a military bloc. It does not have belligerent intentions, and stuff like that. In the meantime, the North Atlantic Treaty remains in place, in particular Article 5, if I'm not wrong, that guarantees military support to other members, etc. It is a military bloc, and its infrastructure is moving closer to our borders. We're not happy about it. There is another trick. I think it's clear to everyone that NATO is just a US foreign policy tool. There is another trick. I think it's clear to everyone that NATO is just a US foreign policy tool. Europe is aware of it. Take the French president. I do not need to make anything up. Another trick is that once countries join NATO, they have no say over the arms that are installed on their territory. This was the case in Romania with missile defense. Poland will soon get it too. It will be really close to our border. It is certainly a threat to us. We see it as an attempt to neutralize our strategic nuclear capabilities. However, it is clear their efforts are doomed to failure. I believe experts now see this as well. Now that we have the cutting-edge systems that I mentioned earlier, these moves are no longer a threat to us. I do not want to say what we really think about it. Still, there's nothing positive about it. So yes, we do see this as destructive activities that escalate tension. There is nothing good about it. There is nothing good about it. There is nothing good about it.
Well, the Russian president is one of many world leaders who see that this world is definitely heading down a spiral of death, ending in nuclear war, which will affect every individual on the face of the planet. Definitely something needs to be done right now, but again, like we've said before, world leaders are scratching their heads trying to figure out which path is the right path to peace. Well, Yisrayl Hawkins and the House of Yahweh have been bringing that very information to the world for many years now, directing mankind towards the ways to peace. That's actually found in every holy scripture. Contact the House of Yahweh to find out more about the path to peace. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can email us at info@Yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen. And again, don't forget the free online aids to assist you in studying and understanding your Holy Scriptures, the Yisrael Says and Ask Yisrael program. You can find those by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com. Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is Yisrael Hawkins with vital information that you'll be pleased you sat and listened to. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander. Thank you for watching.
At this time, if everyone would please stand, I would like to introduce the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan Yisrayl, Abel Hawkins.
Wow, what a crowd. Look at that. I can't believe it. Oh, boy. What a blessing. Praise Yahweh. Oh, good. Be seated, please. Peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I want you to watch. Yesterday, as I was watching the news, right after the news on Channel 12, it's the only place you can get it on a first day. And down at the bottom of the screen, the screen kind of went blank except for 3 commercials as emblems of something. I only saw the one in the middle, and it was the compass, what they call a compass, a Mason compass, and it had a broken horn from the altar. Those are all broken off, but this one looked more like the one that we have across from the peaceful scene, and this broken horn was sticking in the middle of this compass. If you see that, we need it. Need it to use as in our work too. This right here is left for me to show. Seventh book of Yisrael, part 2. He who rules as Yahweh rules. Teachers wanted. Teachers of righteousness. Children's edition. You can see that. Well, this is so beautiful. Volume 2 and the 7-lamp lampstand. Somebody just handed me this before I came up here. This is on the internet. It's the Unveiling Lucifer, and you can get this volume for $917.87 off of the internet. Now that's one volume. The other one, they got 2 volumes here. Mass market paperback. That was a hardback, I guess. And a mass market paperback is $965 for that book. They're going up, man. That's it. That's inflation. Russia is helping China build a new missile attack warning system, Putin says. That shows what the world is after. Welcome home, everybody. You're a beautiful sight, beautiful sight, and one that's going to be shown very rapidly now, very soon in the great city of Yisrayl. Don't miss any of these. Don't miss any of these services. If you miss one, you're the one that's going to be crying. You really need this information. On this city of Yisrayl, in the gematria is spelled that way, Yisrayl. No one uses that today except the House of Yahweh, and we're the ones that made it famous. It was Yahweh that did it through his house. This is also where you're going to be blessed. You got to remember that it comes from Yeshua's words in Matthew 23:39, and then he quoted it from Psalms 118:26. Psalms 118 verse 26, and he said, you won't see me anymore until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh. And he quoted that from Psalms 118. I showed you that before. I used the interlinear so you could see that it was Yahweh's house. It says House of Yahweh in the interlinear, in Hebrew and also in English, that quote of his. Now the King James Version changed it to the house of the Lord, and glorifying their gods, their Jupiter gods. You might run that one through the gematria. And it is Gematria, as the great Kohan Benjamin Krause Hawkins just brought out today, and one of the priestess. But the house of Yahweh, it was rejected, the tree of life, in Genesis 3. It was rejected, and Yahweh said it won't be anymore. You rejected it. It won't be now until the last days that it's offered again. And of course, he's speaking of a 6,000-year plan. The 7-lamp lampstand, as you just saw right there on that book, or the golden oils. This is knowledge. You and there's no place you can find it on earth except here at the house. You'll be blessed only, that's what the scripture says, only at the house of Yahweh, and only in these last days. In the last days I will establish my house. Well, that means the house of the gods, of course, has been ruling all this time. You're going to see how the great city, the great universe, it's a small universe that governs the universe. The small universe inside protected, it's protected inside what we call the city Jupiter, also named after a god. You can see this, and then, but only in the last days, and Yeshua said, the last generation of the nuclear bomb, the generation of the nuclear bomb that began in 1934. 1934. The bomb began, the increase in knowledge began. That was the computer. Began in 1934. The bomb began in 1934 with the increase of knowledge that Daniel shows you in chapter 12. And I began in the bowels of my mother, and I was born in 1934. And of course, Revelations 12 also speaks of the two witnesses, 11 and 12. And Revelations 12 shows my mother and how she was taken to a certain place and where it was deserted. If you haven't got any history on Oklahoma, you won't know what I'm talking about, but the Oklahoma was kind of swept clean of people because Yahweh did not want me influenced, and so he kept me in a place where I could not be influenced until he got certain things established in my mind to bring me forth to you in these last days. Praise Yahweh. This Jupiter, we ended with this in the last time I spoke to you. We ended with that Jupiter, and I want to bring you just a little bit, not much here. I'll bring you more as we proceed in this feast, Yahweh willing. But Jupiter has a long history, surprising scientists that they're still telling what they don't know. They've written several books on what we don't know about Jupiter. And it's all been kept a secret. It's shielded with an electrical shield. When I was in Oklahoma, I was kind of wandering around, and I was the stupid age of 16. I tell you, that's a bad age. But I was more or less lost and didn't know what I was hunting. I came to Texas, talked to Mother and Dad for a while, and I told them I was going back to Oklahoma. Didn't have a car, so I took off walking. I didn't have a suitcase either. But I got back to Oklahoma, and I asked my aunt. I went to Dad's brother's house, and I asked them. I talked to them for a while, and they said there's plenty of work in Shawnee, and told me about where to go. So I went, and there was a Greasy Spoon Cafe. They serve great food. I gave them some recipes of Mother. Their business increased right after that. I talked to the man and woman that owned the restaurant, the cafe, and I said, I hear that there's some work here that maybe someone like me could do. And she said, she looked out the window. We're sitting at the front booth. She looked out the window and she pointed to a building across the street and it said Auto Electric Company. Auto Electric. So I went down there right then, got the job, came back and thanked her, and I said, now, do you know where there's a place to live that I could rent and pay later? She said, just across the street right here, that's my building, my apartment building. And she said, I'll rent you a place. I think it was $7 a month. It might have been 10, but It seems very cheap now. It seemed I then. But rented me an apartment, went to work. I don't know how long I'd worked there, but now get this now. That's where I learned about electricity, and that's the subject right here. Before I tell you that, I want to tell you about what else occurred in that auto electric company. I learned to build generators, start to finish, and I found out how electricity works. This is a beautiful thing, because when I saw the Jupiter and the clouds, and they were moving like this in different directions, going around Jupiter, moving in different directions, I said that's creating electricity. But that's what came into my mind. I learned that from building generators. And after that, I was working under a hood, putting a generator on a car. A salesman walked in, and he had a Hertel Blue Ribbon Bible. It was about as big as the Book of Yahweh, and my eyes locked onto it. And I sat down at the desk and him over my shoulder, and I went to looking through this. And he went to trying to point it out to me, and I said, "No, don't bother me. Let me look at it." But it had the concordance in the back, Crudence Concordance, had a Smith Bible dictionary in it. The Crudence Concordance was a grand thing. The only thing that topped that was the center reference that I'd been working to make of my own. Didn't know anyone made a center reference. That was the first one I ever saw. But that center reference was magnificent. And I bought it, and I told my boss that I'd only work another week for him if he wanted to replace me. And I told him I was going to Oklahoma. Well, Jacob, JG at that time, he lived in Texas, in Graham, Texas. And so I called my cousin who had a car, and he said, well, we're going up there in so-and-so time. And I said, great, can I tag along? And they said yes. So we went to Oklahoma so I could show this Bible to Jacob. And he was in love with it too the minute he saw it. And right after that, a month or so after that, we started selling them. Door-to-door selling. All of that took place as training for this job now. Jupiter. What does it have to do with Jupiter? Well, I just told you that there's electricity being pumped in this. They don't know what it is. They just know it's clouds. They can't see through it. But they know it's generating electricity now. They know that much. Jupiter has a long history surprising scientists, all the way back to 1610 when Galileo found the first moons beyond Earth. These moons, by the way, are oceans. They have oceans. Oceans of water. The scientists know this. They know this about the moons. That discovered, found the first moons beyond Earth. That discovery changed the way we see the universe. 50 in line from the sun, 50 fifth in line from the sun. Jupiter is by far the largest planet in the solar system, more than twice as massive as all the other planets combined. Now, if you can get this, you've got to get this mass, because you won't be able to see Satan's office in your mind unless you, and what was turned over to Satan, what the gods are, where the gods are governing from, and not just governing, they're ruling. They're actually ruling, and it's a force rule, like a police force, armed forces rule that they have that's going forth from that planet. It's not just a planet, it's a universe in itself. You could stack 1,300 planets the size of Earth inside Jupiter. It's more massive than all the other planets put together, all of them combined together, more than that. Now this, I know it's hard to do. You can't imagine that. But I'm telling you, this is a protected universe. Universe. Keep that word in mind. Universe, a protected universe. Jupiter rotates. You don't need that. Jupiter Great Red Spot is a gigantic storm that's about twice the size of the Earth itself. Twice the size of the Earth. And it looks like a small red dot on Jupiter. There are no rockets powerful enough to hurl a spacecraft into the outer solar system and beyond. There's none. Now get this. In 1962, I think that was the year I went on on radio, reaching out by radio air service with the message of Yahweh. In 1962, scientists calculated how to use Jupiter's intense gravity to hurl spacecrafts into the furthest regions of the solar system. We've been traveling further and faster ever since. Jupiter's facts. It's by far the largest. Jupiter is more than twice as massive as all other planets combined. If you can get that in your mind, this one thing that they're calling a planet is housing inside of it a space, a universe from which goes out their message, their rulership, their governingship to the rest of the universe, except for the gods on earth, except for that. Now they've sent Satan to do that, her and a third of her people that follow her, just a third. The rest of them are still there. Satan owns a massive kingdom that's been given to her. Jupiter, Jove, named after gods, Jesus, King of the gods. That's what it says here, King of the gods. The ruler of Olympus and the patron of the Roman state. Oh, isn't that great how they put that in there for us? Patron of the Roman state, Jesus was the son of Cronus, Saturn. I think that's all I want to. No, I want to bring you one more, because an international team of researchers has succeeded in measuring the current system responsible for Jupiter's aurora using data transmitted to Earth by NASA's Juno spacecraft. They showed that the direct currents are electricity. Currents were much weaker than expected, and that the alternating currents must therefore play a special role on Earth and on special role, period. On Earth, on the other hand, a direct current system creates its aurora. Jupiter's electric current system is kept going in particular by large centrifugal forces which hurl ionized sulfur dioxide gas from the gas giant's moon, low through the magnetospheres. Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system, has the biggest aurora with a radiant power of, it's 100 terawatts. That is 100 billion kilowatts. That is 100,000 power plants. 100,000 power plants. Got that? Power plants? We got a bunch of them. Had one out at the lake, run by lake water, and they took it out. But these are power plants it's speaking of. Power plants would be needed to produce 100 billion kilowatts. 100,000 power plants would be needed to produce this light. So it's producing light for Jupiter. Similarly to the one on Earth, or ones on Earth, Jupiter's aurora displays themselves as two huge oval rings around the poles. They are driven by a genetic system. They are driven by a gigantic system of electrical currents that connects the polar light region with Jupiter's magnetosphere. The magnetosphere is the region around a planet that is influenced by its magnetic field. Most of the electric currents run along Jupiter's magnetic field lines, also known as Birkeland currents. The total current is approximately 50 billion, no, the total current is approximately 50 million amperes. Jupiter's electric current system are driven by the enormous centrifugal forces in Jupiter's rapidly rotating magnetospheres. Because of Jupiter's fast rotation, Well, don't need that. Okay, the power plants. What are they for? Well, we don't know. Science don't know. Satan is a female. If you get this book, and the one they're advertising here for $900, if you get that, or you can get it here while you're here for a few bucks. If you can't afford it, we'll try to make sure we get you one of them very expensive books. But Satan was greatly loved by Yahweh. He mentioned her name quite often, a lot over the past 6,000 years. He mentions her name a lot, and you can tell the emotions by reading some of the inspired writings that still exist. In Genesis 3, he says, Genesis 3:14, he says, so Yahweh said to the serpent, he says, because you have done this, you're cursed yourself. You cursed yourself in doing this. Yahweh said, he says, I sit in the council of the gods, and I tell the gods, you should be doing this, and you should be doing that. Satan was included in this. Satan, in the book of Job, she comes before Yahweh, her and her sons, and tells him that she's been up and down in the earth, and of course criticizes mankind. Her and Yahweh's original sons. He says, the serpent, he says, you have literally cursed yourself here. He says, I established you. Now, Satan, or Halil, she was already established in a high, prestigious, godly atmosphere. And then Yahweh married her. If you can get this in your mind, this increased her prestige among the gods. He married her. So, if you remember King David, before he died, there was a woman brought before him to maybe survive him and revive him, and she did survive herself. And of course, just from that incident with King David, after his death, she had much power, and that's shown by Solomon when she was asked for in marriage after King David died. And Solomon said, you're giving her the kingdom. What this man has asked for is marriage, but what he's getting is the kingdom of David. So that's how much prestige is shown that a wife has when a husband like Yahweh would marry her. She gains a great deal of prestige over or inside a protected universe. Inside a protected universe that's about 1,300 planets the size of Earth could fit into. It's not really, I don't believe it's a planet at all. I believe what's going on outside of it is the electric fields that pump the electric energy for this universe that is shielded where no one can see it from the outside. They may even could see the earth from inside. I don't know. We don't know yet. But there's one-way shields, windows even today where you can see out but others can't see in. So you might keep that in mind. But this is a universe, I'm saying, inside this planet, where she herself is a member, her and one huge Democratic or Republican Party behind her. What you see on earth is what you see coming from heavens, from the heavenly bodies, from the heavenly beings. The gods are running the universe. They're also involved as much as Satan allowed them to be. She couldn't allow much because of the fact that Yahweh limits her power over the earth. The earth where Yahweh made mankind, he's got her limited. And when she came before Yahweh with his sons, Yahweh said, you can touch man, you can't touch mankind, you can't touch Eob, but you can afflict him. He gives them the power to deceive, but the deception can't be forced. It's got to be accepted. The deception, it has to be accepted by the person who is wanting to be deceived. The proof is in the prophecy. The prophecy has come true. It's already come true. You can't deny the bomb is here, and this generation started in 1934, as Yeshua said. You can't deny any of these prophecies that's come true, and now a gematria was put in the Hebrew language and given to Abraham. It was discovered by accident in this generation, and for this generation, actually discovered for this generation. The book of Yahweh that we're reading from shows that it would be for this generation. It was taken captive by the Catholic Church for 1,500 years when they destroyed the temple in 70 AY. It was taken captive. All the writings of the apostles and prophets were taken to Rome. It wasn't released in Oklahoma until 1600s, just in time to get it printed on the slow printing presses, and to his house, a small King James Bible to his witness, so his mother could train him for 3.5 years, for the 3.5 years, clothed about with darkness. Now in Revelations 11, I urge you to study that or get the mark of the beast. Revelations 11 speaks of the two witnesses. Revelations 12 shows you the woman that was hid so she could nourish one witness that would be telling about the 3.5 years. That witness was also born in 1934. This Y that we have made famous, the House of Yahweh has made famous, that you saw a while ago, that you saw just a minute ago. I'm going to show it again. Hopefully you can see it. In 1934, I've got my finger on it if you can see that. 1934, the Y. The Y. You see that Y? Run it through the gematria and you will see it. Also, 828, you know what 828 is? 1934 is the year I was born. 828 gives you the exact date. And here it is again, the 828, twice, and then 1934, the year. There's no way you can deny this proof. The only thing you can do is accept a lie, which the world prefers to do. I remember the arguments I had with preachers when I was 17 and how they would get mad, or one of them did, and threw his King James Version against the wall. But with that Bible, that King James Bible, I started out on that. I had to, because that was the deception, but you could prove the deception in the King James Bible. And like the very first chapter in Genesis, it says, let us make man in our image. Now, verse 26, verse 27 contradicts that and says, God made man in his image. He made it. That God there, that they removed the name Yahweh and put God in its place, was the deception, and now the whole world has accepted this deception, and they don't want to hear the word Yahweh. In fact, they become very bitter. Many people do. But I can tell you this, it's changing. Since, praise Yahweh, we're reaching the entire world right now. Every nation is being reached, even the small ones. And congregations of Yahweh are being formed throughout the whole world right now. Yeah. Praise Yahweh. Well, all of that was prophesied, and the proof is there in the last days. Last days means last generation, as Yeshua pointed out. In the last generation, I will establish my house. It will take this to all nations, he says. That was not possible until this generation. I remembered telling JG that in 1962, I said, I think this cassette player was invented for us to send this message out. And of course we used it, the cassette player. It was a dinosaur, a big thing. and now we do this from the House of Yahweh. We do it from private buildings. We can broadcast to the world, every nation, and there's thousands and thousands of people. I bet in this service alone right now, I would guess that there's probably 300,000 at least people watching this show. Well, remember Psalms 118, verse 26. From the house of Yahweh only. From the house of Yahweh only. Look it up in the interlinear. It put the name Yahweh back in there where it belongs. As Unger's Bible Dictionary said, it never should have been removed. It puts it back in its place, and you can read it in the Hebrew, if you can read Hebrew, but you can also read it word for word in English in the interlinear. Interlinear. Gets you one. You can get them at the bookstore pretty cheap, or you can buy them online for $1,000 probably. But I love you, brethren. We're going to have the best feast ever. The blessings that Yahweh has promised from the house of Yahweh are already coming your way on this first day, and they will get better as the feast goes. Yahweh bless your understanding. I love you.